Welcome to the drawing room here at Mapperton. The past year has been an amazing journey for American Viscountess. In particular, we hit 100K subscribers. But also, I was able to visit historic houses dotted all around the United Kingdom. But in particular, a highlight for me was visiting the Montagu family seat, Hinchingbroke House in Cambridgeshire. I visited with my father-in-law, the Earl of Sandwich, and his sister, Lady Kate Hunloke. And it really was rather poignant for me to reminisce with them about their childhood at Hinchingbroke, what it was like to grow up there. I mean, Hinchingbroke is, after all, a castle.
There's one room at Hinchingbroke which still bears some resemblance to the time when John and Kate lived here as children.
Oh, this is exciting, coming back into the library.
With that beautiful glass. Gosh, I remember this room was really not coming in here very much. I mean, you all have a different feeling. It's a grown-up room.
And people playing cards is what I remember. Well, as it is now, I mean, it was generally a very quiet room and you could come in and work here.
Do you remember that on either side of these steps there were bushes? I can't remember what the name of it is. You don't remember that?
No.
Yes.
No,
you see, I remember things like the trees really here, because didn't Sarah and Anne have a favourite tree? That it wasn't the cedar tree, I was told. It was a beech tree that was called Cubbins.
Yes, we
Cubbins.
call it Cubbins.
But I don't see a beech tree that could be Cubbins. Is it gone completely?
Well, it might be just behind that one.
But the trees in this garden are quite, you know, as children, we knew about the cedar tree.
We ran a lot up and down here, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
Lots of stories.
Yes, absolutely. And the
Croquet.
daffodils that I see are still down there.
Are they still out?
Yeah, well, just.
Unfortunately, in the 1950s, Hinchingbroke House had to be sold, like so many other houses across the UK. And that's when our family bought Mapperton, where we are today. However, one thing that really struck me was that the last Countess of Sandwich to live at the Montagu family seat, Hinchingbroke House, was Alberta Sturgis, the 9th Countess of Sandwich. And she was an American just like me. She's from Chicago, just like me, had 4 children, just like me. This, I'm certain, is Alberta.
Oh, do you think? That's interesting. I've not seen...
Yes, because when I've seen her in, you know, I'm doing my master's
I do.
on Alberta. It has to be Alberta because when you look at some of the footage of Hinchingbroke,
and early photographs, have you got?
And early photographs, you can see that
Right.
it is. And you can see bits of auburn in her hair.
I was just looking for that. I was coming from this angle. You can see the auburn hair.
You can see the auburn hair.
But then it's very light touch.
Yeah. After my visit to Hinchingbroke House, I went over to Brampton Church because I wanted to see where Alberta was laid to rest, and there are many other Montagu forebears who are also laid to rest there as well. But what happened was while I was there, I stumbled upon a mystery. I'm here today visiting the Montagu crypt, if you like. It's here at St. Mary Magdalene, and I've been here once before when my husband's aunt passed away and we had the service here. But I'm coming here today with a purpose. I want to see where Alberta is buried. I know she's here. I've actually never seen her stone before, but I also want to have a look at the crypt. And of course, I think that there's a chapel inside. I vaguely remember seeing it. So it'll be interesting to see what I find inside the church. But this is where many Montagus have been buried. It's an extraordinary church, absolutely beautiful. Right away you can see the chapel. It is a Montagu chapel because of the coat of arms here, the lozenges and of course, many coat of arms, but in particular, right here, the Montagu coat of arms. And you can see what makes this one different as opposed to the others surrounding it. This obviously has the garter there. This would be the first Earl of Sandwich right here with that blue garter, if you like, around it. As soon as you enter, you know that you're entering once again into this chapel filled with a remembrance, if you like, to past Montagues. It's surrounded everywhere, not just with the coat of arms and the lozenges, but also in the stained glass. So if I just read one text here, inscription here, it says, "To the glory of God and in memory of the Honorable Sidney Montagu, this window is dedicated by his brother, Edward, the 8th Earl of Sandwich." But part of my reason, of course, to coming to Hinchingbrook and to here in Brampton, because of Alberta. So Alberta is my subject for my dissertation for my master's, and an American just like me. But the big difference is, number one, she was an American heiress. I'm not. I'm just an American. So she brought with her an extraordinary amount of wealth. And number two, she lived at Hinchingbrook. Of course, I will never live at Hinchingbrook. And it's fascinating for me to be able to start to uncover Alberta from the time that she married George in 1905, really to the time of her death in 1951. But I want to uncover so much more, and I guess what it was like for her to actually live at Hinchingbrook, now that I've seen it in all the rooms and how it worked, and walking up and down and around into so many extraordinary, fantastic rooms that we saw. What was it like for Alberta to be lady of the house, to manage that house? I think Mapperton's difficult. Hinchingbrook is 5 times the size of Mapperton. And I think with Alberta, I suspect that she would have had a lot of ups and downs, because I know moving away from your own country is difficult, and from your own family, I mean, that's hard. But then immersing yourself into a different culture in one sense, but also a different society. You know, being a part of the aristocratic world, especially during that period, would have been tough. Alberta would have seen 2 world wars, so she lived through the First and the Second World War, and I know that one of her children, her second son, died, not in action, but doing a test flight during the Second World War. He died in 1940. So there's so much to uncover with Alberta, but the wonderful thing is that she saved everything, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. So I know in the churchyard that there is the Montagu vault, and that's where I'm going to head to next. So I do remember this, like I said, very vaguely, but I knew that this was really where the Montagu crypt is. And you can see it is a crypt because you've got the ventilation grid right there. So when I look around, I mean, at least I can at least read these, but the one I was looking for is actually right here. And this is Alberta. And it says, it's 3 of them actually, in loving memory of Olga Montagu. And Olga was George's sister. George's was Alberta's husband, the 9th Earl of Sandwich, plus Alberta, Countess of Sandwich. She died October 1951, plus George, the 9th Earl of Sandwich, and he died 11 years later in 1962. And then if I look over here, we have their son. So this is Hinch, which we've referred to him in many of the Hinchingbrook films as Hinch. That's because he only took on that title, Earl of Sandwich, for 2 years, and then he dropped it because he became a member of Parliament, an MP. But you can see he always kept Viscount Hinchingbrook MP. He just didn't take on Earl of Sandwich. That's why he was always called Hinch. And so here he died in 1995. He's buried with his sister, we called her Bets, and this is when I was here before. So this is why I do have one recollection of the church and being inside. So you can see right here, George and Alberta. We know that they had 4 children. There's Victor's buried here, their firstborn. Then you've got Drogo here, and then you have Bets, their youngest. And if you're wondering where Faith is, well, we saw where Faith is. So Faith is at Rockingham. So Faith is in the church there at Rockingham alongside her husband, Michael Seymour, and of course their 3 boys that never survived infancy. So this is, again, it's lovely to see this, the entire family, nearly the entire family here. And then moving up here, so you can see here we've got Edward, 8th Earl, never married, but he is buried alongside his mother. So his mother was the 7th Mary, the 7th Countess of Sandwich, and she's buried there next to her husband, John, the 7th Earl of Sandwich. But what's confusing me is above there is William Sturgis. So remember, that is Alberta. That is her maiden name, Sturgis. And in fact, her father was William Sturgis. And little side note here, Nestor, our youngest, one of his middle names is Sturgis as well. But what's interesting here is it says, born March 1st, 1907, died March 1st, 1908. Now, that leads me to think that Alberta had a baby that only lived a year. But what's confusing about that is that 2 months after, if we assume she did, this William Sturgis died, she then had another baby born 2 months after May named William Drogo Sturgis Montagu. So it'll be, I'm gonna have to go through the archive at Mapperton and through her letters, and around that time between 1907 and 1908, in particular March, and just to see what I can uncover. One of my favorite pictures here at Mapperton is, of course, of Alberta. And here she is as a newlywed. This pastel was done right after she married George Montagu. This is dated September 05, and she married George in July 05. It was done at Ridgely, the family home in New York. And what really draws my attention to Alberta are her piercing blue eyes, and they do match my knitted vest that I'm wearing. So I just want to say a huge thank you to this week's sponsor, which is Beaufort & Blake, one of my favorite British brands. And you can check out their spring lookbook now. You can see I'm wearing a beautiful top here. Love this check gingham top. I paired it with this knitted vest, and I put on some jeans. But even though we're coming to spring, there are still some cold evenings. So I have another jumper that I wear at night. Perfect for those cooler evenings. I love Beaufort & Blake's British craftsmanship. And you can get 15% off, but for just a limited time until the 5th of March by using my code down below, 15 from Julie. So who was this baby? Who is William Sturgis? He was born March 1907 and died exactly a year later, March 1908. Let's remember that Alberta married George Montagu in 1905. So she was in England during this period. And that's what I can't figure out. So I've asked my father-in-law to meet with me to see if he might be able to shed some light on who was this baby, William Sturgis. One of the mysteries, John, that I'm hoping you can help me solve is around this baby, an American baby with the last name Sturgis, that's how I know it's American, related to Alberta, born March 1st, 1907, died March 1st, 1908. And I want to know if you have heard about a story around this, a theory, who is this baby? Can you tell me anything about this baby?
I was just as puzzled as you by this. I remember it was quite a few years ago, because every so often we have to restore cemetery and the memorial and the paths around, and make sure the daffodils are growing, etc. Because it's such a dull memorial, you really have to keep it smart. There was William Sturgis. We absolutely didn't think about what was happening in America, I'm afraid to say. It was something that had occurred, and it was clearly a baby only lasted, what was it, a year?
1 year, 1 year.
1 year, and it was only a year after my grandmother produced my father, Hinch. So they were obviously a good resting place for this child, as long as it survived, which it obviously didn't. But do we know what was happening in the family?
Well, no. So it's one of the things I want to uncover, because as you said, Alberta had given birth recently to your father, which we call Hinch. He was born in 1906. So if I look through the timeline, Alberta was married July 25th, 1905. Hinch was born, your father was born in 1906. And then a year later, another baby, but a Sturgis, so an American baby, was born. But whose baby was that?
Well, I think because it's William, it's very likely to have been Hollister's child. Alberta's brother's child is all I can think of, because it was harking back to the name of their father.
Right, of course, because Alberta and Hollister's father was William
Sturgis. Sturgis, who descended from the great Sturgis banking empire.
Exactly, in Chicago. Yes, so I think we've been able to unravel between you and I that this baby, William Sturgis, was Hollister's baby, so therefore Alberta's nephew was left here in England. So the question is how the baby died, where were the parents, Hollister and his wife Jean, were they here in England when it happened, or were they abroad?
I mean, it takes me to my own older sister, who died only 3 months old from pneumonia. Pneumonia was one of the reasons, apart from difficulties in childbirth. The Spanish flu wasn't much later. You know, there were lots of reasons they could have lost the child.
Right, that they could have lost.
But the tragedy is that they weren't on the scene, or we don't know.
Right.
Whether they were there when the child died.
Yes, so I will have to do some research around that.
Well, we need Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot, so you'll have to go and be the researcher.
Well, that's what I am. Now, the other thing that I did find in the archives, and this is something that was tucked away in a box. It's been torn here, so I think we will need to put it back in the Muniment room, but in one of the archive boxes. It was in box number 92.
Is that related to Alberta?
Well, it is, and I found it really fascinating, because having been now to Brampton and seeing the churchyard, and of course...
Oh, it's the vault.
It's the vault.
Now,
I do know about the vault. I also know that the vault, I believe, is full.
Well, we've decided it is full.
But, so, there isn't a date on here, but I think it's proposed family vault at Brampton, and anything, you know, I mean, it's, you can see it's laid out rather meticulously.
Well, the baby does help us, because it was clearly an Edwardian vault, if he's part of the membership of the vault.
Of the vault, exactly. But you can see that there are places for 10. So there are places for 10, and underneath you can see the coffin, and then it gives you the sort of side.
In very good condition, this plan, isn't it?
It is in very good condition. So it was...
On greaseproof paper.
Yes, it was done by some contractors. Again, there's no date on here, but what do you think the date?
Well, I do recognise Thackeray. They were the builders who went on all the way up to the 50s. So
right.
They were the sort of local Huntington builders.
They were the local Huntington builders. And what do you make of this? I mean, this has been done then. You believe that this was finished, that what we see, the finished product now, if you like, was because of the 8th Earl of Sandwich. Is that correct? This would have been his designs.
Yeah, very likely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know who else.
Right.
Because my grandfather was not, my great-grandfather was not really involved in decisions. he was the younger brother, so he wouldn't have passed anything on to us in the story.
Right, right. So, so it's yes, exactly. And I think just to make that point, that your great-grandfather was the second son of the 7th Earl of Sandwich.
That's right. He
Just
was
so
the
we can
younger brother.
Younger brother.
Yeah.
So the 8th Earl of Sandwich is technically really your great-great uncle.
That's
and then
correct.
it went sideways.
Yeah, yeah. He never had children.
He never had children, and so his younger brother, your great-grandfather.
The Admiral.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
Right,
so he wouldn't probably have been involved.
well, this is something we obviously want to make sure that we take very good care of, and I'll put it in
Well,
some
good.
acid-free paper.
Very well done to find that.
Yep, no, I've been going through quite a bit.
But that was in an Alberta
This
file.
Yes, this was in an
So
Alberta
she
file.
may have taken a bit more interest than we realised, you know.
Well, I think that from what I can see in the Munimit room, the amount of box files with her name on them is absolutely extraordinary. And every time I open up a new one, it's letters to and from. And what's fascinating about Alberta, John, is that she requested, in particular, after her mother died in 1931 and after her aunt died in 1944, she requested that all the letters that she wrote to her mother and to her aunt, Josephine MacLeod, be sent back to her. So we have the to and the from. Not only do we have the letters that Alberta received from her mother in particular, but we also have the letters that Alberta wrote to her mother. And that very much helps me really put together the puzzle of
Very
Alberta.
good. Julia, this is absolutely wonderful, and I don't know how lucky we are that you can research for the family and being a member of the family. So I look forward to seeing what comes out.
Yeah.
Very much indeed.
Well, I can't wait to share it.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness for my father-in-law, who was able to shed some light on who this baby was, William Sturgis. So now that we know that William Sturgis was Alberta's nephew, I want to head back into the archives and really look in particular at those dates, 1907 to 1908, to see if Alberta wrote anything about baby William. I am surrounded by letters from Alberta, but also letters that Alberta received herself from her mother, from her aunt, from her brother. She saved everything. And this is just really the beginning of it. There's so many more boxes to be uncovered. But of course, I'm looking for that period, that mystery around William Sturgis, and that period between 1907 and 1908. What happened to this baby? Where was this baby? Who was this baby? We do know that it was her nephew, so it was her brother Hollister's son, but that's pretty much all we know. But what's been a lot easier for me to sort of find that period is because not every letter has a year on it. It has the date, but it doesn't have the year. But her stationery and where she was living right after her marriage to George Montagu was not at Hinchingbrooke, but it was at Chalfont Lodge in Buckinghamshire. So it's easy for me to take those letters and pile them up and then start to look through them, even if they don't have the year on them. This one, though, I did find, and it's January 7th, 1907. So it's before the baby was born, but there's references about Jean and Hollister's baby, Jean being Hollister's wife. And from this, I can also really uncover that her brother traveled quite a lot for his work. So the bit I want to go into is, in particular, is here. She writes to her, this is a letter from Alberta to her aunt that she's very close to, Josephine MacLeod, and she says, yesterday, Mrs. Compton came for lunch and told me about Hollister and Jean. She says that 3 days before he left, a firm had come forward and offered to do all their business for them in Buenos Aires. They are now talking it over. If they decide to accept it, it will mean that Holly is not needed in Buenos Aires.
but they like him so much and what he is doing, that they may rethink and keep Holly. Then she goes on to say that if they accept they will keep Holly, they will probably send him somewhere else. You are not to breathe this to a soul. And then she continues on to say, I will know in a fortnight probably, and I only tell you this as Holly may be sent somewhere else, the Cape Town, or be kept here in England, or on to Philadelphia, but they will probably be here in early November. Then she continues to say, I think if Hollister is kept here in England, obviously that's an option, and then sent to Cape for a month, Jean had better have the baby here. Dr. Callender could come down at first, and the village doctor, also who is very good, could take care of her afterwards. And then it says that they could come and have all the things that are necessary done. So rubber sheets, etc., for the crib, and baby clothes as well. So you can see that Alberta's very close to her brother. She's very involved, and she's making sure that Jean, who clearly is pregnant, this is January 1907. We know that William Sturgis, their baby, was born in March 1907. She's making sure that if Hollister is sent away to what looks like Cape Town, that there's a possibility for Jean to have the baby here in England, and Alberta would use the doctors that she knows best. So one of the letters that I found was, again, from Alberta to her mother, and I know that this was written in December 1907, and she's referencing in the letter, which I think is absolutely fantastic, she's referencing my dinner, which I had planned for them, turkey, plum pudding, crackers. So this is around the Christmas period. And there's references here of Billy's presents. And then she goes on to say, Billy naturally is absolutely stolid. It's a word we don't use very frequently in today's language, but it means calm. So she's describing her nephew as a very calm, naturally, absolutely calm baby. She then goes on to say, and this is really what's incredible, is she's talking about the crib and should Billy be out of the crib or in the crib right now. And she says this, she writes this, Victor, her own son, was content to be held in that crib after 6 months. And Billy is 10 months and still perfectly safe in it. So this makes complete sense now as far as putting the pieces together of the chronological order. We know that William Sturgis was born March 1907. We also know that her brother Hollister traveled a lot. This is now December 1907. She references William as she calls him Billy. That must have been, of course, his nickname. Billy was 10 months here at Chalfont Lodge, staying with Alberta. She's looking after him, and it makes sense because he was born in March 1907. We're in December 1907, and we know that after this, he only lived for about 2.5 more months. These letters are so important, and what's really astonishing and wonderful is that Alberta was such a collector herself, as you can see, but very, very interested and keen on family history, in particular her own American family history. Next up for me will be diving more into the archives and looking for more letters printed on Chalfont Lodge, 1907, 1908, because I really want to crack this mystery of what happened to William Sturgis.
If you love historic houses as much as I do, why not consider becoming an American Viscountess patron? Because of our patrons, we're able to create these high quality productions. And when you become an American Viscountess patron, you then become a part of a wider community celebrating these historic houses. Plus, there's American Viscountess merchandise. You get all of the episodes early and they're ad-free, Christmas cards, photos, live Q&As, and extra bonus content. All details down below, patreon.com/American Viscountess. Oh my goodness, I am feeling so overwhelmed right now. Can you imagine this new bride coming over to this new country, marrying into an aristocratic family, letting her brother know that, yes, I can take care of the baby while you travel, and having her nephew in her care, and the baby dying here in England. It's hard for me to actually put into words now that I know more about the circumstances around the death of Billy. She called him Billy. She was writing about Billy. I think for me personally is that there's more to this story. There's more I want to uncover. I want to find out how Billy died. What did he die of? I also want to find out from Alberta herself, what was she feeling after Billy died? And those letters I still need to uncover, but I feel very certain that they are there. So this is just really part one of solving this mystery. I think we still have a long way to go. So stick with me because I will be filming more about the archives that Alberta has left. I hope you've enjoyed this pilot and, as you can see, a new chapter here at American Viscountess. Throughout this year, I'll be traveling up and down the UK, visiting some extraordinary historic houses, their owners, and telling those stories past and present, plus a few royal connections as well. There'll also be some specials, and in particular, of course, the coronation of King Charles III. I cannot wait. So do join me back here every single week because it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think you're going to discover a lot too.